Welcome to Sounds Pretty Genuine, a weekly conversation about what we believe and how we live it. I'm Kendall Ciesmeyer.
And I'm Alessandra Biaggi.
We're living through a moment right now where it's become easier to reduce people than to understand them. Easier to sort each other into categories than to ask what's actually happening inside. And that failure of imagination, the refusal to grant people an interior life, is at the root of so much of what's broken right now. Today's conversation is about what it looks like to insist on the opposite. Holland is an actor and producer whose work keeps returning to the same question. What happens when we're allowed inside? As Andrew Young in Selma, Dr. Algernon Edwards in The Nick, Kevin in Moonlight, and so many more, he's built a career on portraying Black men with the full depth they're so often denied. Their doubt, their tenderness, the parts of them that exist beyond what the world demands. His recent work includes The Dutchman, The Actor, and Love Brooklyn, and he also produced and starred in Exhibiting Forgiveness, a film about whether reconciliation is possible after profound harm. For listener context, Andre is a friend. Alessandra and I met Andre at HDS at Harvard Divinity School in the same 10-person program where Alessandra and I met each other. But we're so excited to have Andre here to speak with us. Andre, welcome to Sounds Pretty Genuine, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Good to see y'all.
Yay.
Good to see you too. We're pumped to have you. And we know also that those who are listening will be pumped to hear everything you have to say because in all honesty, there is probably nobody who tells a story better than you. So
truly,
we
Like,
cannot wait. We
pressure's
can't.
on.
We can't. Okay, so let's get right into this, right?
All right.
So Andre, to know you is to know, of course, that you're from Bessemer, Alabama. It's probably the first thing that I learned when I first met you at Harvard, which is a steel town, right, just outside of Birmingham. And you've stayed connected to that place even as your career has taken you basically all over the planet, right? At Genuine, we believe that knowing yourself is connected to knowing others, and that both are prerequisites for changing anything at the societal level. So I'm curious what Bessemer taught you about whose stories get told and whose don't. What did you absorb growing up there about what kinds of lives were considered worthy of attention that are connected to those stories?
What a beautiful question. Um, yeah, I think, Bessemer taught me pretty much everything I know about everything, but definitely about what it means to be genuine. I grew up, Bessemer's a very, very small town, very close-knit town. And, my family's been there for many, 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 many years. My mother's family grew up in a part of Bessemer that's called McCalla, and my father's in a part called Shades Valley. And they're about, 5 minutes away from each other. But each of the neighborhoods are very, family centered. So on my dad's side of the family, we had like Holland Drive, which is, where I grew up. So all the Hollands lived on the
Wow.
street. And then on my mother's side of the family, there was, Sanders Road, which is her maiden name. And so her family all lived on, on either Sanders Road or McQueen Drive. So, it was a kind of place where nobody ever locked their doors. People would always drop in on each other, check on each other. I think one of the things I was taught was, like what it means to really be in community with other people. So for instance, we rarely had to leave the community if we needed anything, like if the number of times my mama would say, go up to your Uncle Clyde's house. He got a mess of greens for me and, take him this such and such on your way. And it, or if I had a flat tire on my bike, I knew I could go to my Uncle Willie's house and he knew how to fix them or, the men would fix on cars all the time. And, Saturday mornings, I wake up to the smell of like, hair grease being burned in the kitchen because they in there doing hair, getting ready for the weekend. So it was just a place where everybody took care of one another. And I think that ethic is one that is like so deeply instilled in me. Yeah. So I think that's maybe the main thing I learned. And then in terms of who stories get told, I think one of the things that, that kind of close community brings with it is that everybody's got a place in the story. you know, whether it's in the kitchen while people are doing hair or on the front porch of Aunt Hannah's house or wherever it is, you know, there's always somebody with a story to tell, and there's always somebody who's willing to listen to that story.
Mm.
So yeah, that's what I learned growing up.
Do you Go ahead, Kendall. Go.
No, I was gonna say every time you talk about Bessemer, there's like a look in your eyes. You just get
Mm,
and your entire disposition kind of just like settles in
mm,
place in like this very beautiful way. And I think it also, I don't know, every time you talk about it that I've been exposed to, I suddenly feel like I'm in that space, in that place, like in and I think that's like the power of your storytelling,
Yeah.
honestly, is that you like very much describe in detail like the things around you in this world. And I notice that I settle a little bit more into myself when I hear you speak that way, which is really, really cool because it's
Mhm.
not just the details, it's also the like format, the
Yeah,
pacing, the style, the cadence, all of those things that like
totally.
really
mm.
change how someone can receive something. Um, I was wondering, thinking about Bessemer and thinking about this like storied career that we're gonna dive into. You've played so many different people, different characters in different places and spaces. And do you think about your work now as being in conversation with Bessemer? And what does that mean to you? Like, how do
Mm.
you bring Bessemer into those spaces?
Good man, y'all got some good questions. Um,
We tried.
yeah, yeah, I think you know, Bessemer and like my family and my community are always in the room with me wherever I go, regardless of what character it is I'm playing. You know, when I was young, when I first started acting, um, the reason I started is because my mom, you know, she is an avid reader. She read the newspaper every day, like cover to cover.
Mm.
And anytime she saw something in the newspaper that she thought was interesting, she would make me and my sisters go do it. You know, so like she might read and say, "Oh, there's a marine discovery camp happening in Mississippi in the summer. You know, you gonna go? You should go do that." And I said, "Well, Mom, I don't want to go to marine discovery camp." And she'd say, "That's okay. You gonna go?" And next thing I know, we're going to Mississippi. And so the same kind of thing happened with acting. She had seen in the paper that across town in a neighborhood called Mountain Brook, which is probably the wealthiest, most privileged, like whitest part of Birmingham, where, you know, they're historically like hostile towards people who are
Mm.
not wealthy and privileged and white. They were having a summer drama camp. And so, you know, she said, "Well, you going to go do this." And so off I went. And we, you know, would spend the summer learning how to sing and dance and, you know,
Wow.
hold soup cans and smile. And, um, and so, uh, in that space, I was the only person of color who was a part of the troupe. And I ended up coming back every summer and doing it. But, um, I remember one day, and I said I wasn't going to tell stories all day, but I'll tell you this one, then I'll,
Tell
you
us
know,
all the
but
stories.
I remember
It's a
one
gift.
day, my mom worked at U.S. Steel, which is you know, well, you know, U.S. Steel. So she would work and then get off work, pick me up, and she'd take me to drama school, drama class, drama practice for the play. And uh, she would always wait for me, you know, to go home, which was way on the other side of town. And so we had this man who was directing the play. We were doing a play called The Poor Little Match Girl. And it was a terrible play, but we were doing it. And our director, his name was Mr. Hatcher. He was this kind of, you know, large man who, you know, loved Broadway and was just so passionate about it and making us be our best. And I was playing a character named Hans, which tells you all you need to know about Poor Little Match Girl, right? I don't give Hans, right? So um at one point, we were up there doing it, and my line was you know, "Please, sir, you know, would you like a pickle?" That was my line. And so I would say my line. And at one point, Mr. Hatcher just said, "Andre, if you don't smile when you say that line, I'm going to come up there and pinch your little cheeks." And then out of the back of the, out of the back of the audience, in the back row, my mom jumped up and said, "No, you not." You know? Now, I didn't
Great.
know she was even in the theater. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't know she was there. And, but she was. And
Oh
I
my
think she
goodness.
always was, you know, every rehearsal, even though I
Wow.
couldn't see her. And so when I do stuff now, whether it's a play or a movie or a TV show, I always feel that she and my community are in the room with me. So I'm always thinking about how is what I'm doing on stage or on camera impacting or affecting the people, who I'm bringing into the room with me. So I feel like every character I play is always in some way trying to make my parents proud, make my community feel better about themselves, and to reveal a part of us as a people that I think people sometimes don't see.
Hmm. I think that's so it's so nice to hear that backstory, which I've never heard before, Kendall. I'm not sure if you have either. But it's so nice to hear that because it complements so much of what we know about you when you show up in rooms, which is that you bring your whole embodied self to the room. And to what Kendall said about just settling in to yourself more and listening and feeling more connected to yourself. I think that's one of the gifts that you bring when you tell stories. And it's also, I mean, it might not be rare in numbers, right? Lots of people might actually feel the same way, but not everybody shares that. And I think it's one of the most special parts of leaders, entertainers, people who are in the public arena to share that part of them because it makes them extremely human, but it makes it so
Mm-hmm.
easy to talk to you and connect to you
Mhm.
because everybody has parents. Like, love them or hate them, we all have parents. We all come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's so front and center to how you just lead as a human that it just shows up in every way. And it's really cool to hear that you bring them with you to every room. I
Mm.
think that's so beautiful.
It's very
Thank you,
humanizing.
Yeah,
Anastasia. Thank you for saying
Uh,
it. I appreciate it.
it's real.
so I want to talk a little bit about this the kind of like path your career has taken you in so many different places, but I keep coming back to Othello. And then when
Mhm.
you played Othello at the Globe in London, that seemed to be a very pivotal role for you because and for those of you who are not Shakespeare nerds, Othello is a Shakespearean play. Andre's you've been long passionate about Shakespeare,
Mhm.
which is very cool. And something that we talked about at length in our seminar, in our classes at Harvard was the play Othello, which I'll be honest, I had a little bit less context about Othello than perhaps Hamlet, which I
Mhm.
had read growing up. But one of the things that seems like it really stood out is like, here we have one of the most famous Black characters in the Western canon, and Shakespeare does something. I'll call it strange. That's probably not the right word for it, but strange. But he denies us access to Othello. We get
Yeah.
Iago gets the soliloquies, he explains himself, but Othello, we just watch his jealousy and his destruction unfold almost from the outside. We see what he does, but we don't really feel like what it's like to be him. And I know that that was something that playing him eventually kind of wore on you in that way, that we were lacking the access to his interior world. When I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the moment at which you came to that realization that you were like, wait a second, why are we not getting more from him? And how that shaped the kinds of characters and stories you wanted to play from there on.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for the question, Kendall. To start at the beginning of it is, I think it's important to say, well, first of all, um, when you're coming up as an actor, particularly a Black actor, early on, there are certain roles that you are often given to play, to experiment. If you're doing Shakespeare, Othello is one of those. There's kind of this unofficial Shakespeare canon that people talk about, Black Shakespearean canon. So it's
Mm.
Othello, this character Aaron the Moor in this play in Titus Andronicus. You sometimes see Black actors play Horatio in Hamlet or Laertes. There are a handful of characters or the Prince of Morocco in Merchant of Venice. Anyway, there are a handful of characters that are kind of like, oh, these are the ones that unofficially Black actors tend to get to play.
Mm.
And that was something that I kind of sniffed out pretty early on in my career. And I remember being in school as an undergrad and being handed an Othello speech to work on, and I really didn't want to do it. And I don't know why I had such an aversion to it, but I think it was because it felt like this thing that I like had to do, or that, you know, I wasn't allowed to do Hamlet somehow, or I wasn't allowed to do, you know, whatever these other kind of great parts. And
Mm.
so I resisted it. So when the opportunity to play the part came along many, many years later, to be honest with you, my first impulse was like, you know, I'm not sure I want to do that. You know, I would rather do something that feels a little bit unexpected. But there were a lot of reasons why I said yes to it. One, because it was a dream of mine to work at the Globe.
Mhm.
I mean, really a dream. When I was in undergrad, I'd studied abroad in London, and I used to go to the Globe like once a week. That you could pay £5 and like stand in the yard and watch, and I would watch the same show over and over and over again, trying to just understand
Mm.
how it was working. And also because my favorite actor was playing Iago, Mark Rylance, who I think is the finest actor in the world. He's really, really,
Wow.
really special. And we had a great director. There were a lot of reasons to do it. Um, but I think the turning point for me came when there were two times. One, you know, at about the midpoint of the play in Act Three, um, there's this big scene where Iago basically dupes Othello. He tricks him into thinking that Desdemona was cheating on him. And the thing about the play is that prior to Act Three, Othello, he comes on at the beginning of Act One, he gives his beautiful speech, and then he kind of disappears from the play for an act. And in that time, Iago is like seducing the audience and everyone's falling in love with him. And then Othello comes back. And by the time Othello comes back, the audience is kind of like allied themselves with Iago, you know? So it's difficult for
Mhm.
them to understand, who is this Othello guy? Um, so when
Mm.
he's getting tricked, what I noticed is that the audience was often laughing, you know, throughout the scene. And there's a
Mm.
line where Othello, after Iago leaves the stage, and Othello's processing what he just learned, you know, he says, which is really his only soliloquy moment. He says, happily for, as he's trying to explain, like, understand why is this happening to me? He says, happily for I am black and have not the soft parts of conversation that chamberers have. So he's saying, like, is it because I'm black that she's done this to me, or because
Mm.
I don't speak well, or because, and then before he even has time to think through that like, you know, thought like fully, something else happens and then the play takes off. So we don't really
Mm.
he never is left alone on stage long enough to try and unpack what's actually happening inside of him. And so the
Right.
result was the audience often laughed. And then I felt like, man, am I doing something wrong here? Because I don't think they're supposed to be laughing at this part of the play.
Mm.
And it just got me curious. Well, what are some of the experiences that other actors who played the part had? And I reached out to a number of actors who played the part. I read a bunch of, you know, people's accounts of playing it. And pretty consistently people said, like, yeah, this is the tough thing about Othello, is that it's difficult to understand what's going on inside of him. So yeah, that led
Mm.
me down this thinking of like, why is it that Shakespeare, this writer who is so good at writing interiority, hasn't given Othello like a full internal
Mm.
life, legible internal life?
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this, I feel like this role, and you spoke about you in this role so many times in our class. And I
Hmm.
think,
Hmm.
and the impact that it had, also the impact of performing at the Globe and what that meant to
Hmm.
you, the gravity of it, and like the awe of just being on that stage, and also
Hmm.
your dad being in the audience, which was,
Mhm.
extremely special. I won't tell that story for you, but just the special nature of it,
Hmm.
considering the timing in his life. And I do wonder that role, because you brought it up so many times. I'm wondering if, when you're choosing projects now, whether you're producing them or you're acting in them or you're writing different
Hmm.
things, how you're thinking about that character, and whether you're correcting in your characters that you're creating or your characters that you're producing, and how you're telling their stories in ways where the audience perhaps doesn't laugh. Because it's interesting that you said that. I think it's extremely deep to say to yourself, well, why would they be laughing here? And it's curious. It's a curious thing, because maybe historically that's been a part where people who like Shakespeare laugh, and that's like
Hmm.
their cue, and they don't know any better. And so, like, different actors, different producers, different people have to like change and shift the culture of a Shakespearean play, which is challenging but also doable. And I think that the people who are behind these roles and actually go deep into them are able to do them. But I'm mostly curious how you do this with your roles today and how you take
Mhm.
that forward because
Yeah.
that seems to have shaped you in such a serious, important way.
Yeah, yeah. I think, ultimately, I feel like like my job as an actor is to make the audience's imagination believe in mine, you
Mm,
know? And
Mm.
I think that's why that experience in Othello felt so difficult for me is because I knew very clearly like what my imagination was
Yeah.
doing and how I was understanding the situation. And it felt like the 1,500 people watching the show were having a completely different experience,
Yeah.
So trying to figure out a way to
wild.
bridge that gap was like really frustrating. But I think in my work now, yeah, I'm often thinking about like how um, I think like specificity is the key. Like
Mhm.
how specific can I be about what this character's experience of the world is? Like
Mm.
how much can I understand it? And it's not enough to say sometimes people think, well, I'm just going to pretend to be this person. I'll give them a funny walk and I'll give them a funny hat and, make up a voice for them or whatever. But that's like describing a person's experience, which is very different than
Mm.
inhabiting a person's
Mm.
experience. Like you as an actor have to put yourself into their life, which means you have to understand, um, not just the like facts of their life, like that's certainly a part of the work, but you also have to learn how to think like them, how to
Mm.
experience the world like them. And the distance between yourself and this character, the more and more it gets closer and closer and closer and closer and closer until they're just like side by side. And it becomes impossible to distinguish like what's them and what's me, you know? So when I'm doing a movie like Exhibiting Forgiveness, for instance, like
Mhm.
a character who's had a completely traumatic experience with his father, who was like he was not present in his life. He's been abused. Like all these things have been going
Mhm.
on, which is not my experience at
Right.
all. But like throughout the course of the process, it gets closer and closer to where he and I feel like one. So that when I'm having when the character is having an emotional reaction, it's not the character, it's me, like
Mhm.
I'm experiencing that on his behalf.
Can you talk us through a little bit of like what does it look like to become one with the character? Because I think what you're also describing, Kendall, correct me if
It's
I'm
like
wrong, is
radical empathy.
radical empathy.
Yeah.
嗯
100%. That's
嗯
right. And I think that like that to me, that is like what's so missing from our culture today. Radical empathy. Like, what is it like to walk in that person's shoes? What would it be like to be scared of X, Y, and Z? Pick a whole host of different things. And it just seemed like first and foremost, it seems like it comes really naturally to you, and I think that maybe has to do with your family and how you were raised and the love that you were just surrounded by. What is it like? How do you do it in acting? Because I think there must be some kind of process behind the curtain that perhaps we don't see or maybe we do see in real time, but it would be I think that that is so I don't know, it's so clever and so interesting.
嗯 Yeah, I think at its basic level, what I try to do is figure out what is the thing that this character wants. Like
Mm,
what do they think is the thing that will move their lives forward? Whether I agree with them or not, what do they want? You know? And if I can identify what they want and then what they think is the obstacle to them getting what they want, like what's in the way of it, those two things alone tell you a lot about the kind of person you're dealing with. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
mm,
And then you think, okay, now what are they willing to do to overcome this obstacle? Like some people will do things that I think are abhorrent in
yeah,
order to achieve
Totally.
the goal
yeah.
that they have. But there's a reason why they want the thing that they want.
Mm,
And if I can get inside understanding that, then I can understand, who they are and like how they may react to any situation.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think the hard part is figuring out what is the piece of them that I actually understand, that I actually feel like is also
Mm.
a part of me, and there's always
Mm.
something, even if it feels like this is a character, a murderer who I just have nothing in common with. If you dig long enough and you look hard enough, you will find something, you know, that connects you. And then it's about taking that thing and like really understanding it and making it personal, making it yours, and
Mm.
realize it. And little by little, you realize, oh, actually, we're not that different. You know what I mean?
yes.
We may want different things, but there is something that we have that we share, something that we haven't.
Mm,
It's so interesting that you say this, Andre, because I feel like you just so perfectly articulated something that was like at the very nascent stages of Alessandra and I talking about genuine and what we wanted it to be like and what we had learned and what we wanted to share with people. It was this idea of like, what if the person that we disagree with, the person that we loathe, the person that we feel disgust for, what if they're actually really genuine about what they think is the best course of action for their life or the lives of other people? What if they really genuinely think that they're saving the country or saving the world? Like, what if we actually bought into the fact that they were truly like genuine about their desires and about the obstacles in their way, and that we might really disagree with their approach and even their opinions, but could we actually find that thing that you just articulated, that piece of that piece of similarity that we could kind of work
Mm.
with? And so that was just a really cool reflection of something that I feel like we have been talking about for quite some time now, and it's just so interesting to me that I didn't think of the acting process like
Yes.
that before. I had never heard it articulated in the way that you just articulated it. But it makes a lot of sense that
Yeah.
that would be an act of kind of like radical empathy for someone else's story. That was like a very pure articulation of what can happen in a perfect world storytelling experience where you're getting to act and play characters that you can fully inhabit, and no one's trying to flatten you, the actor, or flatten the character, or flatten the story, or adjust things in post, or change the script. The kind of like business machine of the industry, I think, can get in the way, and we talk about this a lot in as we're thinking about the kind of the systems in our way of doing this kind of radical empathy work on at the individual level. Like, try as we might, our hope is that if we're all individuals doing this work on ourselves and each other, that eventually it ripples out to these like systems. But right now we're not there. We still have this like collective um crisis in our institutions. Like, we don't believe in them anymore, they don't believe in us. And as far as the institution of acting, like, that's the industry at large, right? Like, you see it in our storytelling, which I think has grown strangely anemic. We are hedging it, we're flattening it, we're pre-digesting it, assuming audiences can't handle ambiguity. As a producer who's like looking to get your projects placed, and as an actor who's witnessing the headwinds in the projects that you're already existing in, what are you seeing in this like time and landscape, and how much are you able to kind of push back in selection of the work that you take on in an effort to truly get to express that radical empathy?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing, first of all, is like a real foreclosure on the opportunities that, 5 years ago, uh, Black and brown people were getting. You know,
Mm.
there was a time when, not long ago, when people were interested in telling Black stories, and then, hiring more female directors, and then trying to right some of the wrongs that the industry had created. And
Yeah.
I feel like all of that shit. Can I say shit? All that
Yeah, go
stuff
for it.
is being pulled back, little by little. That's what I
Mm.
see, and I think it's often wrapped up in this idea of, well, those movies don't make money, those stories don't sell, and we're in the business of making money. Um, so that's what I see. At the same time, I see a lot of people. Uh, I was just on a call, earlier today with very experienced people who are getting together trying to figure out, well, what do we do? How do we figure out a way to make our own stuff and control it ourselves? And I see that happening a lot in spaces like YouTube, for instance. People
Yes.
are taking it back in their hands and saying, well, what if we just make it ourselves, find our own audience, and then, and make money that way, um, I think people are building community around art in a way that I haven't seen in a really long time, and trying to take back some of the power out of the hands of the studios and
Mm.
the streamers. Um, but it's also frankly, it's taken a toll on people. Like a lot of the conversations I have with folks, people who you on the outside would think are like killing it and are so famous and are having a great time, that people are struggling. Like it's
Yeah.
hard right
Mm.
now, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of folks don't know what to do, myself included. Like it's been tough for me too. So to answer your other question, it's like
Yeah.
I would love to be in a situation where I can only choose to do things that speak to my heart, that I
Yeah.
feel like
Right.
have the ability to impact people, and that's what I want to do all the time. But
Mhm.
the realities are that um, sometimes you got to make choices that
Mm.
pay the bills when you can.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah,
1 for me, 3 for them. 1 for
Yeah.
me, 3 for them.
yeah, yeah. That's the thing. But it also is like I feel like that's such a slippery slope too,
Yes, it
because
It
like
is.
is.
every time you do something that your heart ain't in or that you don't really believe in, it costs you a
Mm.
little something. You
Yes,
know
it
what I mean?
Mhm.
does. And you
Yeah,
go a little less, this is
yeah.
so relatable. I think this relates to almost every industry, Kendall. I'm sure you probably have
No, I
similar
think it
feelings in
totally.
journalism, in politics. The analogous experience in politics is like, "Oh, just sign on to this bill. Oh, just vote yes this one time on this one
Yeah.
thing that
Mm.
takes away all the money for, like, the South Bronx." And it's like, "No, I'm not doing it
Mhm.
one time." But it costs me. It's like
Hard.
you always have to calculate, what's it gonna cost you? What's it costing you every time? Oh, maybe you're not gonna get called for that next part. Maybe I'm not gonna get asked to hold that big bill. Maybe my bills are not gonna move in the Senate. It's like all these little games that you have to play because and I say because dot dot dot. Because what? Because we're also like not
Afraid.
us, but like the people are right, the people above us are so scared to do
Mhm.
what's morally right and like also,
Or just, like, what's
what's
interesting.
interesting and what, like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
feels good and cool and also, like, exciting to do
We're
because it
so
doesn't
risk
fit
averse.
right, it doesn't fit that, like, small,
Yeah.
narrow little
Mhm.
framework that we've created, which is, frankly, I think it, like, makes the world pretty stale, and I think to the point you're making about storytelling and I wanna talk about audiences in a second with you, but to
Mhm.
the point you're making, I think so many of our stories are stale. I think we need new stories, and we need new storytellers because we have lots of old stories, but we need new people to reinterpret them, and we need good people to reinterpret them in
Yeah.
ways
Mhm.
that allow for our moral imagination to come back to life, to remind us all that our settings inside are good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We've, like, lost it.
Hey,
Kendall, yeah.
have you had to, like, weigh that risk-benefit analysis of, like, losing yourself as a an actor and versus, like, what they're willing to buy and, like, how are you actually handling that? I know you described it as, like, a really tough time, but, like, what are the
Mm.
calculations that you're making? What are the risk assessments that you're making?
Yeah, I mean, every day is like that. I'm thinking through those things. I mean, I know, it's tricky in this business, right? Because like if you've done something that people think of as being commercial and like commercially successful, that opens you up to a whole bunch of opportunities, right? Like whether it's working in independent film or working in like traditional like studio movies or big TV shows, people think, well, this person is popular, right? Set aside whether they're good or not, this person is popular and
Mhm.
their popularity gives them access to blah, 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 blah. But if you're only good and you've not been popular, then you don't often get access to the more commercial, things. Um, I don't so I think like the stakes feel a little bit higher. So when like a more commercial thing does come along for me, whether it feels like a perfectly aligned or not,
Mm.
I feel like I'm in a place where I'm having to kind of open the aperture a little bit and say, all
Yeah.
right, well, this ain't exactly what I want,
Mhm.
but maybe there is a benefit in me doing this because it will, set me up to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Whereas before in my career, I never was willing to make that compromise.
Right.
I've always been
Mm.
like, I want to do the things that speak to me and that feel right
Yeah.
and that are.
Yes.
Um, so that's the path that I chose to go down. Some other friends of mine went the complete opposite way and went like, I want to do all the commercial things. And so it's been interesting to watch how these
Yeah.
things have unfolded. So I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out right now a way to like I'm never going to sacrifice my integrity no matter what. I'd rather quit, walk away, go back home and get a job at US Steel. Well, you can't do that no more, but get a job somewhere,
Yeah.
than to sacrifice my integrity, period.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are maybe ways to do smart and interesting things that are also more broadly appealing.
Mm.
I think it's a sign of maturity actually to talk about compromise because I often think sometimes that when we think about integrity, we think about like it's like a purity level. And Kendall and I have talked about this a lot when it comes to politics too. And I think that what I've learned and what seems like what you also have learned too is like, you can be 100% pure 100% of the time. However, then you're out of the game. And if you're out of the game, then the good guys are out of the game and all the bad guys are in the game. And then like, then what's left? So you got to like
Yeah.
keep it's this really sensitive balance between like, you're not going to lose yourself and like, do things that are like obviously morally depraved.
Yeah.
However, you are going to like, okay, we'll take on some things, but like, you have a boundary that you put up along the way where like actually I'm not going to go that far. I'm comfortable going this far. But I think that's like an internal thing that has to happen in all of us that
Hmm.
frankly allows us also to be really good at our craft because at the end of the day no one's pure, no one's perfect. Human beings are messy, but we need the good people in the respective industry lanes to
Yeah.
stay put. And sometimes to stay put you got to like I don't wanna say play the game, I hate that so much, I hate it, I think
Hmm.
that language is so old, like, it's just like, I'm over it, like, let's find new language for this, but I do feel like it's like you gotta kinda, like, jump in a little bit and, like, "Alright, I'll do a little bit of that," but then I'm out, like, then I'm gonna do this other thing that's, like, 100%, like, aligned with me, you know?
Yeah. I think
Mhm.
that, yeah,
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
That makes total sense. And I
Yeah.
think like when you talk like you talking about integrity in that way makes a lot of sense to me too. It's like I used to think about integrity as being like, well, I know what's right and I'm only gonna do what's right. But I
Mm.
think I mean it different. I think I'm learning to
Right.
that what it actually means is to like integrate all the different parts of myself. You know what
Yes.
I'm saying? And
Yes.
that means
Yeah.
there is a part of myself that like maybe does have fun doing more commercial things. There is a silly part of myself.
Yes.
There is a part of myself that's like sometimes does and says the wrong thing. I'm not always right.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I can learn to integrate all the different parts of myself, I think it allows me to experience a like, broader sort of swath of what it means to be
Yes.
alive and to work.
Love that.
So I think is that like how can we integrate ourselves?
I
Like
think that
fully
is
integrate ourselves.
I think that is like so well said. And I think that for anybody listening, it's a lesson for if you're starting out, like how to think about it and for the long term. Cause I think sometimes
Yeah.
we think
Long
about
game.
like the long, right. We need to think more as people of integrity and faith and spirituality. Like we need to think about the long game a lot more
Hmm.
than I think
Hmm.
than we're used to thinking about it. Yeah. Kendall, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is what this is bringing up for me is just this like idea that, you know, when we're talking about the integration of our different parts of ourselves and we're talking about integrity, it's like that has to come from something. Like
Hmm.
where are you rooting yourself? Because
Hmm.
I think that, you know, I like the idea that like a lot of your work like reveals like the messiness of being human and a lot of the roles you've played have revealed like the messiness of being human, the interiority of people. Now we're talking about your literal own interiority and making these choices.
Yeah.
That takes faith, I think, in a lot. It takes faith in an audience if you're acting that in a character. It takes faith in your ability to do the work, maybe something larger. How are
Hmm.
you where do you root yourself, Andre? How are you
Mm,
finding these parts of yourselves and how are you integrating them? Like what's your anchor?
mm,
Yeah, I mean, I think my family and my home are always the anchor for me.
Mm.
My dad is gone now. He always was the anchor for me, but now that he's gone, um, my mom, my siblings, but also that thing that I think my dad and my parents put inside of me. That voice is getting louder the older I get.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it surprised me, it's showing up in ways I'm like, man, I didn't even know that was. I didn't even know I felt
beautiful.
that way. I didn't even know I had that in
Mm.
me. You know.
Mm,
Um, and I think one of the ways it shows up is like um, realizing that like I'm realizing it's not about me. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
I'm in at this point the back half of my life, believe it or not. You know what I mean? I'm on the back nine now. And, generally speaking, I am, and that's
You?
fine. But
You?
I don't see the club. I don't see the clubhouse
Andre,
yet. But I'm on. Come on, Kendall.
you look very young.
And longevity is it's very,
Yeah.
very much in the zeitgeist, babe.
You need some supplements? We got a guy.
Listen, give me the
Sorry, I'm
peptides, all
kidding.
of it. I'm trying to be here.
You are so
Uh,
funny, but yeah,
you know what I'm
I
saying.
do.
I do know what you're saying. Yeah, I do. I'm just teasing you.
But just to say that I'm realizing like it is not about me. Like the things that I like, the world that I envision, the career that I envision for myself, I may not be around to see it happen. You know what I mean? It may not become a reality in my lifetime. But that was
Mm,
also true for, in my business, James Earl Jones. It was true for Paul Robeson before him. It was true for Ira Aldridge before him. It's been true for so many people. And when I think about the characters that I played, you know, Andrew Young spoke about this thing. King spoke about. So many people have spoken about it. It's like, um, I think that so long as I am uh, raising an objection and I am like making work that's important, that I'm like striking some kind of a blow somewhere, you know, I think that is worthwhile. You dig what I'm saying? And I think so long as the people who I respect and who I admire feel a respect for me, I think that means I'm doing something right. And I like that I want to be a part of the continuum of people who are trying to move this thing in a better direction.
I really
Whether we
agree.
get there today or not, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
whether I see it happen or not. But I want my life to be one that at least tries to turn the wheel a little bit, you know. Um, so I think that's how I'm starting to integrate it,
Yeah.
is knowing that like every little thing that I do, every little choice that I make, it's like you on that ship, you turn the wheel a little bit, you don't feel the shift, but you
Yes.
wake up a week later and you somewhere totally different. I'd like to be
Yeah.
a part of
Mm.
putting my shoulder on that wheel a little bit. And that makes me feel worthwhile, like useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also like it really lacks ego,
Yes.
honestly. Like
Yes,
it
it does.
really to make yourself part of the fabric or part of the relay race
Hmm.
Yeah.
of pushing something forward.
Mhm.
Um it makes it less about you and more about the long arc of justice, if you
Yeah, yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um And I think that is really cool because I think that so many of our leaders like end up making it really about themselves,
Yep.
and I think we all suffer from that. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
if they really truly thought about this as like a baton race, like I think that
exactly.
they would cede their positions more quickly, and we
That's right.
would get new people to carry the torch, new ideas, and we would the idea about power is that like we just
Yeah.
have people who sit and hoard it all, and so that
Hmm.
Yeah.
just feels like a very generous articulation of what you're trying to do,
Ye
and I love that.
Yeah.
um
I think
when
too, just quickly,
Yeah,
and I'll say
yeah.
this
Yeah.
quickly, I think too that like there's something powerful in realizing, at least I'm coming to realize that like it doesn't even take as many people as I thought it to make a
Mm,
difference. You dig what I'm saying? Like
that.
Mhm.
when you look at those images
Right.
of my hometown in Birmingham, the famous images of water hoses and the dogs and stuff. It's like there were people in the streets who were protesting, who were,
Yep.
demonstrating. But there was also a whole bunch of people on the sidewalk watching. You know what I mean? And like
Mm,
I've always had this idea that it takes everybody in order to make a change, but that ain't true. It
Right.
don't it don't take that many people.
Right.
You know what I mean? When the abolition movement started, I learned just the other day, it wasn't but 3% of people in the country who thought this is a good idea. You know what I mean? Which like is a
3.
small number, but like
3%.
that's what
that's a
that's
very
what
small
I
number.
was in class yesterday, and that's what we discovered together.
That's wild.
Um
God. But
that
this is this
yeah.
po yeah, no, continue
No,
because
that's all.
this
Just that
this
like yeah, it don't
this
take
is it.
everybody. Yeah.
This I mean, this is I think this has more wisdom in it than I think most of the people, to Kendall's point, that are leading us today, and I think one of the things that feels so difficult about the moment that we're living through politically, right, just to tie us and bring us back into, like, this present moment, is that our leaders could simply just get up from their desks, get onto a plane that's paid for by the United States government, get into the street of Minneapolis, and simply stand there arm in arm with the rest of the other leaders and make a show that they're willing to risk their lives and their offices and their power and their positions to make sure that we preserve democracy, freedom, our integrity, protect our immigrants, right? To do all of the things that we say that we care about and the ideals that we stand for. And I think that part of, I mean, what you're describing is it's so powerful because that's the history of this country, and we've
Mhm.
forgotten it. We have simply forgotten it, and I think that to the effect
Or
and
we
to
never learned it.
or we
One
never
of the
learned it.
two.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
I think it's a both end. I think we've totally, absolutely right. And I think it's extremely frustrating because to your point, it doesn't fucking take that much.
Mm, mm,
It
And
doesn't.
and I think that we're doing like a below the bare minimum at the moment that we're living through. And I think it could be a lot less painful if we had a lot more people who thought like you do.
mm, mm,
Mm.
If we're thinking about telling really good stories and what telling really good stories does for us, does for society, I mean, I believe in the impact and the power of a story. I know you do, Andre,
mhm,
because you've made your whole life about it. But I also think it's like an active invitation that you're opening a door into a room and you're saying, like, come on in. But I
mhm,
think that hospitality shouldn't be passive.
Yeah.
Like, I think that we are also ideally asking something of the guest, asking something of our audiences. Um, you have to be willing to enter, sure. You have to be willing to be like changed by what you find, perhaps. But when you are thinking about the stories that you're telling and the stories that you're exposing your audience to, what are
mhm.
you thinking in your mind that you're asking of your audience?
I think I'm asking for for their imaginations to be open, right? For them to to open themselves to the possibility that, like, you know, they may see something that they don't expect. They may find something that they didn't know was there.
Hmm.
And I think I'm asking them also to like transform, you know. I think it's like ultimately it's about transformation, you know. Like it's kind of difficult to explain, but I'm thinking about like in exhibiting forgiveness, for instance. There's a scene where towards the end of the movie where my character confronts his father. Really, his father comes to the art gallery opening and
Hmm.
confronts his son, and they have this
Mhm.
scene in the office where they get into a big fight in which my character finally says the things that he's been holding inside, and by being honest, it transforms him, it transforms their relationship, and it transforms the other character.
Hmm.
But when we shot the scene, those things all happened in the story, right? And I think we did a good job of executing that. But underneath that, what was happening at the same time is that the director of the movie, whose story it was an autobiographical story.
Hmm.
The director was over there watching the monitor, like crying his eyes out.
Mm.
Mm.
The other actor, who was in the scene with me afterwards also, broke down crying. And the three of us ended up in a little room together, just crying about our fathers, the three of us.
Hmm.
Now, I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's like that's the magic of it, is
Hmm.
that we as artists do the thing.
Hmm.
Um, we show people like what it's like to experience a thing so that they don't have to experience it. But by watching us experience it, they get to have a transformative experience themselves.
Mm.
I think
Hmm.
and so I think what we ask of the audience is, it's like what Shakespeare says in the beginning of Henry V, when we speak of forces, think you see them, think that you see them.
Hmm.
Let our what does he say? Let us on your imaginary forces work. That's what
Mm.
he says,
Hmm.
and I think that's what we're asking audiences to do. Let us work on your imaginations,
Hmm.
Mm.
and we might just be able to transform you in the process.
Right on. I wanna stay here and I wanna stay on the film exhibiting forgiveness and obviously on your dad because I think
Hmm.
again just to go back to this, your dad has played and continues to play a central figure in your life, and he passed away not that long ago, right?
Hmm.
And then you made exhibiting forgiveness in the shadow of that relationship, and now that we've talked about it, it's the opposite of your relationship with your dad, right? And I think that, I don't wanna really collapse the distance between your life and that film, but what I keep thinking about as you're talking through this and we keep returning back to the same kinds of themes is that we the people that are closest to us are sometimes, like, the most opaque, right? Like, we
Hmm.
think that we know them and then perhaps we may not, and we live alongside them for decades and things unfold and some things are hidden, it's just the nature of being human, and then all of a sudden, like, they're gone.
Hmm.
And
Mm,
then we realize how much was happening inside of them that we actually never reached. And
mm,
so, I mean, I think about this with my grandpa, so that's why this is extremely relatable to me. But I'm wondering, like, has grief taught you anything about the limits of knowing another person or about what remains honestly like unknowable, even
Hmm.
in the intimacy of that relationship?
Yeah, there are so many things I feel like I think that was one of the hardest parts about his passing was just knowing that there were so many things that I didn't know. With my pops, there was so much that I discovered about him, towards the end of his life. And then,
mm,
obviously, even after he's gone, I'm still discovering things. I think one of the things that really was, that I noticed all along the way was that, being a black man in Alabama, first of all, he was a person who had like an enormous appetite for life. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like the most charming, the most
mm,
sensitive, the most poetic, the kindest person you ever want to meet. He never met a stranger. You know what I
mm,
mean? And anybody who knew him would say exactly that.
love that.
And over the course of his life, he would always bring me with him to places, whether he was going on a work, meeting or something. He'd make me put on my suit and come with me. He said, "This is my assistant." He would always bring me with him. So
that's
I
sweet.
got I got to witness him in a lot of different spaces. And I knew that the person that he was at home was so very different from the person that he felt he had to be
Mm,
in the world to just get by.
wow.
Yeah.
And I also was with him in those spaces in between and I could see what it cost him
Yes.
to have to
Mm,
I don't want to say perform, but like to be these different parts of
Yes.
himself. And I don't think it's not that he was being false or that he was
right.
faking it, you know, but
Totally.
it cost him, you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm,
And so I think for me, I think the best tribute that I can pay to my father is in my lifetime, as best I can, to integrate all the different parts of myself
mm,
into
mhm,
Yeah.
one so
mm,
that I don't have to be different parts of myself for
Oh,
different people all the time. You know what I
mm,
mean? And that's kind of the struggle of my adult life is trying to figure out how to be genuine, how to be authentic all the
mhm.
time, you know, as scary as that is. Um,
that is so
so
well said.
yeah, that's
No,
how I'm thinking
Oh
about
my
it.
I
goodness.
know. I'm blown away by that.
Andre.
I
Yeah.
am. I am.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, it's also like, I mean, it it seems like that's like part of the relay race that you're a part of as well is like, and we're all part of that in our family contexts, like shedding a little bit of intergenerational
Hmm.
trauma, a little the stories that are passed down, the roles and responsibilities that we have. Like, how can we be more free? How can we be more
Mm,
free? How can we be more free?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it seems like that process has also been so like uniquely reflected in the stories that you've told. I think Terrell from Exhibiting Forgiveness is such a like a perfect example of this. And I know that we've like focused specifically a lot on exhibiting forgiveness, but it really is like a very unique story and it does feel like you put your whole self into that project. Um
Thank you.
mm,
yeah, and it just feels like a practice of being like what you're practicing is something that I think we're trying to encourage more people to do, which is to just be wholehearted and in
half sure.
public. Wholehearted and
Wholehearted and
half
half sure.
sure
Oh,
That's right.
in public. And so you kind
That's
of
right.
already articulated this, but I'm wondering if there's something in addition to what you've just described, this integration process for you. If there's another element to it that you can share that's like something you're currently in process with or something that you're currently learning or unlearning, or give a little bit
Beautiful.
more
Yeah.
color to that
That's a beautiful
that
place to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm trying to learn um how to let other people into my life. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
In a real way. I know a lot of people, but I'm not sure that a lot of people really know me.
Mm.
And I think a part of that is because I sometimes feel frightened to let people really see who I am. I feel sometimes embarrassed,
Mm.
about who I am sometimes, some of the
Mm.
things that I do and choices that I've made. And I have a bit of a people pleaser in me where I want everybody to like me. I think because I'm afraid that people are going to leave me, if they don't like me, or if I don't somehow like
Yeah,
earn their love. So I'm in process on working on letting go of that people pleaser, which I think also means developing a new kind of relationship with like the younger me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I guess in the way that my father brought me along with him in my little suit to go on his things, I think I can maybe bring little Andre with me. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And take better care of him.
giving us you're gonna kill us
Oh,
here.
yeah, it
That's
kills with the tenderness,
no,
man.
really,
I
in a
can just,
beautiful
like,
way.
see little Andre in my mind right
Mm.
now.
Hmm.
Pretty special.
Yeah.
That's so special. I love that,
Hmm.
and thank you so much for sharing that because I know that's vulnerable and, like, that's
Thank
very
you.
much a practice of your effort, it seems.
Mm.
A byproduct,
Beautiful,
we're getting that generosity of your share here. Um,
Thank you.
beautiful,
and
really.
just yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I think that that's, like, the perfect place to end, honestly, because
Of
it really
course.
seems like, what you're doing in all facets and of your life is trying to kind of, like, show your true self and share the true stories of other people that you
Mm.
play with everyone else, and I think we all benefit from that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
also think that's a very human endeavor that we are all on our own journeys with too, so it's very, very
for sure.
relatable. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for
Thank you.
doing this,
Thank you
Andre.
all. Thank you
Really
all
Beautiful,
for doing
appreciate
this.
you.
It's beautiful, and I'm always here. If
beautiful.
y'all want to talk some more, just let me know. But thank you for having me, and I've enjoyed the time.
What's your schedule look like next week? Should we do
All
same place,
right,
same
let's do it
time?
again.
Thank
Another
Yes, I'll be on
round?
you.
time this time.
Thank you.
Amazing.
All
Well,
right.
thank you
Thank
so
y'all so
much.
much.